So we finally got some details about the Season 2 emergency update for Tekken 8, as they call it. And it's not simply just fixing the problems with Paul Phoenix and Jack 8 in terms of how unfair those characters are. It's a more general update that is fixing seemingly the biggest issues that Tekken 8 has right now. I've always thought that the biggest concern for Season 2 was just how high the damage output is, and how it seems that damage scaling has been significantly reduced. Asuka can do 100 damage just from standing combos, and I thought that was pretty insane. Now, the first change that they've highlighted in the forthcoming update is increasing the maximum health value. So their biggest concern is that a lot of matches are seemingly very one-sided, especially if you ever fight like Jin. He can perform like 80 to 90% damage in combos, and it gets to the point where this basically becomes a two-touch game in most instances. Any launchers in this game are very dangerous, and increasing the health would certainly help in terms of increasing interactions, but my only concern is how exactly much health is going to be added. Every character has 180 health, and I'm curious as to if they're going to increase it to 200. I don't know, I hope it's not too much. My concern is that if you have like poking or just normal standing attacks, they will be least effective, and any launchers into big damage will obviously be more effective. But if you can poke a character and it only does like 5% damage, and like what's the point, right? Like for Nina, her back 1-4 is one of the better combos in the game, especially for punishing quick attacks that are unsafe. At least, you know, they're unsafe enough to be punished. And that does about 15 to 20 damage, and if you increase the health value, it might only do like 10% instead. But I don't know, maybe they'll figure something out. Unless this is simply just a temporary change and they will continue to adjust it as we go forth, which I do think is going to happen. I don't necessarily like the idea of adjusting the health values. I think like adjusting the damage scaling is far more important. The second big change says gradual adjustments to overly high reward moves. It says this update addresses the overall inflation of attack strength and combo damage by implementing adjustments that can be done quickly to moves that provide excessive reward. We recognize that this is a game-wide issue rather than a problem limited to specific characters, and we plan to continue reviewing and tuning these aspects progressively. Examples of adjustments included in this update: balance adjustments to high-performance moves that can repeatedly create advantageous situations and lead to one-sided gameplay, and adjustments to moves with disproportionately high reward compared to their risk, ensuring fairer risk-reward balance. I think that's very, very fine. Obviously, you want to increase interaction, because it seems like, as Tekken 8 is, and I've repeated this a few times, if you get touched once, you're going to hurt a lot. And I think it gets to the point where it's a little too ridiculous. So I'm glad that Bandai Namco are taking accountability for the lack of transparency and communication. And the developers stressed that in Season 2 they wanted to focus on defense, but in reality they did the exact opposite, and they made this a very hyper-aggressive offensive game. I naturally tend to be a much more defensive player. I enjoy the parries, the blocking. I want to be a much more defensive player. I think if you sidestep a move, it's one of the coolest things ever. I prioritize defense. Even when I play King, I want to be very, very defensive. So despite the developers wanting to focus on defense, they did the opposite, and the heat system in this game further encourages very aggressive play, like rush down 50-50s, that's the big thing. So the third major change here says rebalancing the offensive and defensive aspects of the heat system. Currently, the benefits gained by the attacking player through the heat system are considered too great. The following adjustments have been made: revised damage scaling when using heat dash to suppress combo damage inflation. I think that's great. And the second, adjusted frame advantage on hit for heat engagers, maintaining benefits for the attacker while allowing the defender with more opportunities to respond. I think that's fantastic as well. Additionally, adjustments have been made to chip damage as follows. Of course, one of the biggest complaints with this particular season was the incredibly high amount of chip damage certain attacks would do. So the chip damage related changes are: reduced additional chip damage during heat, change the system so that the moves which already deal chip damage do not receive extra chip damage in heat state. I think that's great. And then there's a note that says Future updates will also include adjustments to the amount of chip damage dealt by individual moves. I think that's fantastic as well. And the little end note here says, additionally, we will continue to review issues that could not be addressed in this update, such as moves that consistently create advantageous situations leading to one-sided matches, and attacks with disproportionately high reward relative to their risk. Sort of just reiterating what I said earlier. So I do think it is great that they will continue to update the game. As I said, the game's going to be fixed eventually. This update was particularly jarring, but I'm glad that the developers are holding themselves accountable for misleading the player base, basically. So I'm glad Bandai Namco is acknowledging all that stuff. It's great. You always love to see transparency, especially when it comes to a fighting game balance update, among other things. But they began this by saying, the development team acknowledges that following the Season 2 update, the overall game balance has shifted too heavily towards offense. We sincerely apologize that the actual balance changes did not align with the development intentions and policy previously communicated to players. We deeply regret not being able to address the improvements and adjustments that the community had hoped for. Moving forward, we are committed to distinguishing between issues that can be addressed quickly and issues that require more timely community feedback for proper review. We will implement a step-by-step update process to improve the game experience. As I mentioned earlier, I'm very glad to see this transparency. I think it's fantastic. And they will continue in future updates, naturally, to continue balancing the game and responding to player feedback. So there is still a chance that Nina will be nerfed pretty heavily in the future, as I have been concerned about, because Nina and I have been pretty tight, really since Tekken 6. But all joking aside, I am very glad that this change is happening. We might not immediately get the big, huge fix that we want, but I'm imagining in May, maybe after the next major tournament, the game will be in a good state. So I just wanted to talk about the forthcoming update that Tekken 8 will be receiving. As of now, it will be tomorrow night where I live, but depending on where you live, time zones are different. I think it's interesting that both the Marvel vs. Capcom Fighting Collection and Tekken 8 are receiving updates the same day. I think it's great. Both very beneficial updates. Of course, we'll have to tinker with the Tekken 8 update to see exactly what was changed. But I just think it's a great step in the right direction for Tekken 8. And I'm more hopeful. I wasn't immediately like, oh, Tekken 8's dead. Sorry, I'm going back to Tekken 7. I'm moving to Virtua Fighter. I got to play Sarah Bryant one of these days. But I'm glad that, the developers are taking accountability for it. I always thought the game will be fixed eventually. They're going to respond to the overwhelmingly negative response that the game has had. And Harada himself even stated that the backlash was warranted. So that's nice. I just wanted to talk about this Tekken 8 update, which probably came out at like 2 in the morning where I live, but time zones and stuff. So yes, be sure to keep that Jaguar spirit, I suppose.